Alright, so some of you got a heads up, if you were looking keen enough. Got a peek at the next slide. I can tell you the actual sermon isn't super long, so don't worry too much. But we're going to go on a little side tangent. I'll read through the passage that we've got today, but we have done, a little while ago I did a game called Bible Bingo. Does everyone remember how this works? Maybe? Okay, so what I will do is I will slowly read through the passage, but beforehand I'm going to get Eric to help me hand out some pens and paper. So the idea is I have some words. If it's a group of words like ruined the crops, they have to go together. And the idea is that each of you can pick 10 words from this list, which is, I think, just under a third. And the idea is that you pick 10 words, and as I read through the passage, you have to cross them off, and you're allowed to interrupt me to say bingo. Any questions about how this works? Sorry? So you pick 10 words off this list here, or 10 phrases, and I will read through the passage. It will also be up on the slides. As you go, once I get up to those words, you cross them off your list, and you can shout bingo when you've got them all. If I'm going too fast, just let me know. I will try my best. Last time I had to get someone to ask me to slow down. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to choose some words. I see a couple of people still writing. Is anyone not ready yet? Alright, I'll give you another minute. Right, we're ready now? Not hearing any protests? Alright, so I'll go for it. Remember, you can give me a wave or just ask me to slow down if I'm going too fast, but I'll try and keep it slower. Alright. The passage that we've got, I forgot to say, is Judges 6, verses 1 to 18. So, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza, and did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep, nor cattle, nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count them on their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. When the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, and I delivered you from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them out before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live. But you have not listened to me." The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite. Forgive my pronunciation. Where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." "Pardon me, my Lord," replied Gideon. Gideon replied, "But if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?"
Bingo.
Hey, second bingo. There's only 4 verses left, guys. "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh," 3 bingos, "and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites." Another one, leaving none alive. Gideon replied, "If now I have found favour in your eyes, give me a sign." Oh, that was a key one, that it is really you talking to me. "Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." That was very sad sounding bingo. The Lord said, "I will wait until you return." Very good. Right, we got some good bingos. I think Donna was first. So good job. I should have bought a prize. Okay, so now we get into the real sermon. So I have to apologise. I sent Gail a note saying I was changing the title of my sermon, and it was a very quick last minute note. and there was a small typo in there. So it is, I will be with you, a rejected God and a doubting warrior, like a fighter, not like a doubting warrior, like someone who is worried. Although I get the feeling that at times Gideon probably was worried. So we're going to get into it, and there's two parts to the sermon. So first we're going to be looking at context, and second we're going to be looking at just that very start of Gideon's calling. So, quick fire questions to see how much you were paying attention, which, to be fair, with Bible bingo you probably weren't paying as much attention as you could have. So that's my fault. So I'm going to ask you some questions, try and answer them. The hint is these are all within verses 1 to 6. So, who is oppressing the Israelites? Midianites, there's 3 of them. Amalekites, and the other one's a bit vague. Other eastern peoples, yeah. Okay, so, how many years were they oppressed? 7 years, good. Where did they hide? Mountain cliffs, caves and strongholds. How were their crops destroyed? It wasn't locusts. Locusts is a metaphor used to describe the number of people there.
Just their occupation forces trampling them.
Yeah, trampled, camped on, and ravaged, basically. And camels. Camels are mentioned there too. And what did they do after 7 years? Cried out to the Lord. Very good. Finally. And bonus question, why does it say this happened to them? Did evil in the eyes of the Lord? And a few verses jumping ahead, the other thing that it notes is that they worshipped other gods. So, moving on. So just a little bit of an image here for the cycle that they would have had to go through. They start at the top, where their crops begin to grow. There's a little bit of hope coming in. Their labour is showing a little bit of green in it. And then at some point in those crops growing, the enemies come and they camp on their sites. They destroy everything. They leave no livestock alive. And it does say that their numbers was too much to count, like swarms of locusts. So they destroyed everything. And at that time, the people hide. I assume they're fearing for their lives at that point. But when they come back, there's even more sadness and hurt, because there's nothing left for them to live by. Their crops are destroyed, their livestock have been either stolen or killed or chased away, I don't know. But then this happens for 7 years. It's not one off. So it goes back. They must do the work, they'll salvage what they can, and they try and grow some new crops. They grow, maybe there's a bit more hope, but then they come again, and the same thing happens. I don't think I need to repeat this cycle 7 times for you to get the idea. I think after 7 years, you'd be running a bit thin. Like usually, we've got this stuff in the back cupboard that I forgot was there, so maybe we'll use that as seeds and we can grow that for next year. But after a while, there's not going to be anything left in the cupboards. 7 years is a long time to go through what I can only assume is famine. So, when they cry out to God, the Lord answers. And I feel sad for this prophet, because he doesn't get any credit. He's just a prophet. Not even a name, but that's okay. And God responds by saying, these are all the things that I did for Israel. I brought you up out of slavery. I gave you this land. and I rescued you from your oppressors. But the one thing he says, I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live. But you have not listened to me. Imagine that, after all God had done for them, they turned to other gods. And that's exactly what he warned them against. And first of all, I think if you'd had a prophet coming to you after complaining that God wasn't taking care of you, and telling you all the things you've done wrong, then I'd be kind of quaking in my boots. So I think it's important to note that it was probably terrifying in that moment, to have someone come with a word of God, and that word of God is a little bit of scolding. So, moving on. This is an image that I got when I was reading through this, and if you think of God like yourself, if you're raising a child, and you feed that child, you clothe that child, you get up in the middle of the night to change their nappies, or feed them, or stop them crying for no reason, and you're going crazy because of it, and then they get a little bit older, and you teach them to talk, and you teach them to walk, and how to live life, how to do well. You love that kid, right? But then you take them to a playground, as most parents do at some point, and they meet new people. I'm going to call them Jeff and Janet. I hope there's no Jeffs or Janets here. I don't think so, but so I'm going to call these people Jeff and Janet, and this kid comes up to you, your child comes up to you and says, Jeff's really fun, he's my favourite person, I really like Jeff. And Janet, she's so pretty. She's really nice and she can teach me how to do my makeup properly. I'm going to go home with them because I want Jeff to be my dad and I want Janet to be my mum now. I don't need you anymore. Now I have to confess, most of you will know that I don't have kids, but it hurts, just the idea of being rejected by your own child. God is a jealous God, he admits it. We'll come back to that. Oh, I forgot I put this here. This is a meme, and this is an example of what Israel tends to do. So, do I have my laser? So we have God, the loving, kind person, holding hands with Israel, and then Israel gets distracted by someone pretty who walks by. So, we'll move on, but keep the idea of the parent in mind because we're going to come back to that. How does God respond? Any ideas? Not a rhetorical question.
Puts Israel in a position where they get squeezed until they start to realise there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's pretty bang on. So he lets them deal with the consequences of their own decisions. Okay? But eventually, they come back. And they say, this isn't very pleasant. And Jeff forgot to feed me, and Janet, she doesn't really talk to me anymore, but you took care of me. Do you think I could come back to you? And what do you think God does in that moment? One thing that I think a lot of people would do if you're hurt and you felt burnt by someone who you loved very much but they turned away from you. But God doesn't respond to rejection with rejection, does he? No. He tells them off and he lets them learn their lesson, but he doesn't reject them. He doesn't fully leave them. So he sends a judge, and this judge is particularly a warrior, except at this point he doesn't look like that. He doesn't look like this armoured person who is ready to fight and scare everyone off. He looks a little bit more like this. So the moment that the angel of the Lord comes to Gideon, he is hiding wheat in a winepress, specifically hiding it from the Midianites. So he's probably learned after 7 years that you don't leave your food out in the open. And I imagine this image is not very accurate. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a lot less grain than that. So, what do we know about Gideon? Quick questions, any thoughts? I'm really making you guys work for it today, aren't I?
The warrior title might have been more accurate.
Yeah?
Put a place on his kind. Is it not?
Yep.
He was the youngest son.
Likely. Yep. Scared. Yep. Cool. So just the stuff that I've grabbed out of this passage up to verse 18, I've got his father worshipped Baal and Asherah. So most of you know who Baal is. Asherah is a goddess of fertility. So I won't go much more into that. Which means that it's very likely that Gideon was also worshipping other gods. That is me guessing. He is the least in his family, so like Alex said, he is likely to be the youngest son. He is from a weak clan. His interpretation, whether that's true or not, is different, but his people are insignificant in his own mind. And he's hiding food. He's probably hungry, he's probably frustrated, he's probably not had full meals many times in his life. So, that's what we know about Gideon so far, and there's a lot of other stuff coming. But we go on to verse 11. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior, and you can break this into two parts. Most of the things that God says through his angel have two sides of it. They speak about God and they speak about Gideon. So to make it easier, I have made Gideon green and God is orange. So, which part do you think Gideon notices first?
Mighty warrior.
Mighty warrior? It's actually the other way around. But good guess. So, his reply, pardon me, my lord, Gideon replied, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. I wonder if he actually knew who he was talking to. Because if it was me, I probably wouldn't be that stroppy. But it speaks to where he is. He's tired. He feels like God has abandoned him. And he probably believes it at this point. But the Lord turns to him and says, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? And now is when Gideon clues on that he was just got called a mighty warrior. The first part is that he doubted whether the Lord was really with him, and now he's doubting whether God made the right choice in him. And his response, pardon me, my Lord, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. I am insignificant. I won't give a show of hands, but how many of you have ever felt like you were not good enough for God to choose you? Ooh. Sorry. So, God sends has to really reiterate a second time, am I not sending you? And he's like, oh, actually, God has come and he's talking to me, and that's terrifying. And so the third reassurance, God responds yet again, he must have a lot of patience. The Lord answered, I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive. I don't know about you guys, but that sounds like a statement of confidence. So, nearly there. Gideon replied, if now I have found favour in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you. And the Lord said, I will wait until you return. And it feels very wrong, but that's where I'm going to cut it. Because I noticed some repetitions here. But what happens after this is Gideon, quick summary, Gideon prepares an offering and he brings it to the angel of the Lord, who evaporates it with his staff. And Gideon finally really truly realizes the situation that he's in. And he tears down his father's altars, nearly gets killed by the townspeople for doing it. And then we go on to him calling an army, putting a fleece out for God to really prove that he is with him, and so on, so forth. And he chases off all the Midianites. So spoilers, sorry. But at this point, God is speaking, and he's using repetition, which I think is really important to recognise here. So I want to say that I don't believe Gideon was ever equipped to fight, especially not uncountable numbers of Midianites and all their camels. But God was. And so Gideon knew that he wasn't good enough. But what he really doubted was was whether God was actually with him and going to stay with him. And notice that every reassurance that God has, all of those three statements that he starts off with, has the promise, I will be with you. We start off with, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Am I not sending you? God has chosen him. I will be with you, and I will wait for your return. And I want to note here, verse 18, I will wait for your return. I pull it out of context a little bit, but it fits so well. So the context is that Gideon wants to prove that it's really God, right? So he says, wait here, I'm going to prepare an offering and bring it back. And he says, I will wait until you return. But I want to make it really, really clear that there's this really steady sense of response from God here. He never left his people, but he did let them face the consequences of their actions. And if we go back to the playground where we met Jeff and Janet, the fun people, what playgrounds in your life are drawing you away from where God wants you to be? What temptations are leading you in the wrong place? And maybe it's your phone, maybe it's money, your ego, maybe you're like Gideon and you doubt yourself or doubt God. God's calling us back to his playground, and he's got great things for us. And I want to end on a note. God is patient in these responses, and he has this incredible sense of repetition, but affirmation and strength in this. No matter what we say or do, God is consistent. And he says, I am with you, I am sending you, I will be with you, and I will wait for you. That's God's promises. And what more can we need, right? I almost put it in and then I took it out. I wrote a poem a very long time ago, kind of just as I was starting to come into faith, my own faith outside of what my parents had taught me. And I don't know what Bible verses I'd been reading, but I was feeling really encouraged and I had warm fuzzies, just for God. So I would have been 17 maybe at the time. Let's see if I can remember it. If God has a plan for me and he believes in me, then the only thing that can stop me is if I don't believe in me. So I think we need to remember that God's got us, God's with us, God has a plan for us, and God is waiting for us to come back to him. He waits for his children, he goes after the lost sheep. So I'm going to close us in some prayer, and then we might finish it. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for your consistency, even though we are not. Thank you for your guidance, even though we always get lost. Thank you for your strength when we are weak. Thank you that you send people after us, that you come after us when we go the wrong way. Lord, help us to have faith and not doubt. Faith in ourselves, faith in our abilities, faith in your plan for each of us. Help us to have courage to step out into that plan and let us see where you are guiding us. Be with us in the week to come. Lead us and guide us in everything that we do. May we honour you. Amen. I believe there is supper.